how about, now this is kind of like a buzzword right now, and I'm happy that it's a buzzword because I think as an industry, we need to address this and tackle it. And it shouldn't, hopefully it's one day we kind of come across something in the future where this is not something of a question of living wage, you know? So I would love for both of you to kind of tell us more about living wage for employees and how you address that at your organizations. Does this question come up, or is that something that you've integrated so it's not even a question, you know? And please share with us about this and just any resources that you'd like to pass on to our audience that's watching here.
So for, living wage, it's definitely a conversation that's happening. We've been really blessed at Madcap to have managers that are really checked into that as well, which I think is really, really important, especially as we start to scale. We have different retail locations, one in Detroit right now, one up in Northern Michigan, and a couple in Grand Rapids. So having managers that are truly checked into that process and having those conversations with the baristas is the start, right? What is comfortable? What is making sense? We do a lot of data analysis, and every year we try to do a little bit better, right? And I think that's the part that is always difficult, is that even though we're doing better than probably what most people would be considering in this conversation, right? When they talk about minimum wage or living wage, we're doing better in terms of the hourly rates and the tips that the baristas are making, but that doesn't mean it's enough, right? It doesn't mean that that conversation needs to end. It's something that we have to budget for. It's something that we have to consider every year. A resource that's been really helpful that I just thought about, especially for a small business that might not have an HR representative looking at this all the time, is considering being on a PEO model. It's like a secondary resource for you as a small business to have an HR professional kind of looking out for those items, because there is that difference between living wage and minimum wage and what's actually sustainable. So continuing that conversation is always super important for us. And again, like I said, we're really blessed to have amazing managers that are continuing to push that conversation at property level, as well as in the offices, and saying, hey, you guys need to pay attention to this. This is important. We can't just keep losing track. Not that we do. I think we've been very blessed to be able to provide the appropriate wages and tips and combination of each. The baristas have been doing, COVID was a weird time, but I think we've been super blessed to have a good team that's always looking out for that.
Yeah, and I also think that the Living Wage Project is an excellent resource if you're curious about what your area should be making, because I think sometimes that's also difficult on a national level. I'm here in the Midwest. There's a lot of coffee talk on the coast, and of course, our wages are going to be very different. So if you hear something that sounds unattainable, like I could never do that, the resource of the Living Wage is going to help you kind of understand what that looks like in your area. We do something very similar. I do start most of my baristas out at an hourly wage, $9 to $10. Here, just in our county, $14 is the actual living wage requirement. So $9 or $10 might not sound like very much, but my baristas are incredibly passionate about customer service, and we take it to an entirely different level. So they're also making incredible tips. We're talking $40 to $50 per person in a 4-hour shift. So they're definitely meeting that wage standard. And that's, I think, a really important discussion, because coffee is often about people who are in it for the passion, and passion doesn't always pay. And I know that used to be a really hard conversation for a lot of career baristas, is how do I have a family? How do I support myself on, a barista wage or a coffee shop wage without becoming a coffee shop owner? And so these are important discussions to have. And also, there's a different value base. I noticed there was a question about how do we support our staff outside the coffee shop, and I think it directly relates to this question of what are you making? Because we offer a lot of different benefits that help make our baristas' lives more enjoyable. I can't offer right now full-fledged insurance, and most of my staff is part-time, but we do offer a medical package where we pay for our staff to be able to go to the doctor as much as they want, to be able to get prescriptions, so that their health is being taken care of. I make it a point to do something that I call Camp Counsel, and this might not have a financial value to it, but what it means is that I make myself accessible to my staff, so that if they are struggling, if they need a doctor recommendation or a lawyer or some professional help, if I cannot provide it because I am the heart of this community and I know so many people, I'm going to put people in their path that are going to help them achieve the other goals that they have outside of our coffee shop. And I think that that can also be brought into your cafe culture as well. One of the things I preach huge is having a set schedule, and allowing my staff to be able to navigate their own life. If I'm training everybody to an exceptional level, then they can swap shifts and move things around, and it's not going to affect our cafe culture. So if they need to go away for a holiday or personal time or sick leave, it is not a crisis. It is not a toxic environment where we're having a problem with each other, because they're all treated as the adults that they are and capable of contributing to our company in a way that serves them and us best.
I love that, the shared responsibility, and yeah, that's excellent. Thank you both. We are getting some questions from the audience, so I can come back to some of the questions I had, but since we're on the topic of living wage, I see a question here about like how baristas earn tips and managers don't. And so this is like the salary versus like, the hourly employees. Now, I've always reviewed things around living wage, and I think maybe Alina, both you and Jasmine can talk more about this. Is it, are you addressing this from all staff, right? Whether or not your salary or hourly, and then how does it differ between those two payment types?
So on Madcap's end, and this might be different for across the board, right? Because of the state that we live in, because of our setup. So, not being union, or despite where, or depending on where you live, I apologize. There are different rules about tipping and salary. So at Madcap, our managers are salary and they are also tipped. They are able to collect the tips. And so it's mandatory for our managers to work shifts on bar, because they're the ones leading the pace in the cafe of how it should be, how customer service should be, and so that there's someone as a resource at all times for the employees that are working, whether they're new or have been there for a while. So when it comes to scaling the organization in terms of salaried other members of the team, there's a minimum wage in terms of what salary people should be making as well. And if they aren't making that, which that isn't the case at Madcap, but if they aren't making that, there are models where you can have a salary person, but have them be, I think it's non-exempt or exempt. So they can still collect overtime if they're working longer hours. So that's a way that you could probably mitigate some of that if your managers aren't allowed to collect tips, is if they are making a certain amount in wages and salary, have them be eligible for overtime if they're putting that time in. And I think it depends again on the state and the infrastructure in which your business is set up on.
Yeah, we're very similar. Also, our managers are also tipped because, and even our owners, such as myself, work on bar because we believe very heavily in setting that example and being present. It makes me more in touch with my cafe, what's happening on the day-to-day basis, and not just somebody who's sitting in an office overseeing things. But there's also other things you can do, and I think it's important. I love about this panel that Alina comes from a bigger company with a wholesale and a retail background. And so financially, that's going to look different on paper. I have 2 cafes and 25 staff members, but we're strictly retail. And yet we can still offer salary positions and benefits in the form of paid time off, paid vacation. We also love to invest in our baristas, expanding upon their coffee knowledge and giving them more opportunities to grow. So whether that looks like taking an SCA class or going on an origin trip, attending RICO, or things like that, we as a company will pay for our baristas to continue their knowledge and be able to have those experiences without it costing them a dime.
Yeah, that's super helpful to kind of talk about some of the, it still has a cost to the business, of course, but they are benefits that are not necessarily additional numbers added to a salary or something like, distributing tips in a different way. And there's lots of benefits, providing time off, other being flexible with folks that, like somebody mentioned it earlier, I think it was you, Jasmine, like people going to the doctors and things like that, accommodating for schedules. Like workplace culture doesn't have to be just related to my workplace culture is great because I have a good salary. There are other things that come along with that. And both of you have mentioned a lot of good ideas related to that. So thank you. I want to like circle back to, since we're kind of on that topic of like resources, what kind of resources is your company? And I think this is interesting because Jasmine, you mentioned this, like the larger companies, what they're doing, and then what are, if you're a smaller company or wholesale versus retail, there's a lot of different models. And we, of course, cannot have a representative for every single one. But I think I've noticed something that both of you, even being very different business types, you're really aligned on a lot of your approaches. So it would be helpful for you to maybe share a few resources that you all are using in your business that our audience can kind of take away. And if you want to connect it to like some, like why you like this as a success story, that please do that too. Who wants to go first? Alina?
So just to clarify, you're saying resources that other individuals could use in order to sort of implement a better human resource. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
For us at MadCap, there are so many different arms of HR, whether it's benefits, compliance, compensation. So we really employ the local community in ways that I think that everybody can do. So the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce, I'm part of their HR roundtable, and it's a conversation that I have with other HR professionals about, hey, what are some resources on how to find employee assistance programs? These aren't things that I'm an expert in. These are things that I'm interested in. And so really leaning into the community at hand. We have brokers for our insurance, right? So people who will do all the heavy lifting in terms of negotiating and bidding for us. And these are all available, in every local community. You can find that. A PEO is a great resource for people who are looking to start a business and might not have the bandwidth and capacity to do all the HR things, like creating a handbook. You'll have someone assigned to you to help assist you through that process. I think there's a lot out there. It just takes some, local involvement, as well as looking through and just trying to figure out what kind of organization you want to be first. I think HR is the infrastructure that you need in order to have a successful business. I akin it to the financial infrastructure, right? If you don't have a good financial infrastructure, then you don't have a good HR infrastructure, nothing is going to really work out super well. But there are so many people out there and so many businesses out there that do this, that help you through that process.
Yeah, I think Alina and I had a conversation earlier in the week, and I really appreciated how she brought out that it's vital to have this as a foundation of your company before you even open. It can't be an afterthought, and it shouldn't be something that you're reactive to. So we shouldn't be dealing with these issues as problems come up. We should know before those issues even arise that we have something in place to take care of whatever comes up, because that should be built into the core structure of our company. So my business looks just a little bit different because we're just retail. And I start all of that foundation in our training manual. As I mentioned in the interview process, I'm already outlining exactly what kind of company we are, what we expect. We try really hard to interview, 8 to 10 people, and we put them through 2 or 3 interviews. And a lot of people in our community might think that's just a coffee shop job. But I see my role in the community, especially because I hire so many young people and so many college students, as ushering them into the real world. And I want to prepare them because I take my company professionally and seriously, just like any other job they're going to do after they leave me. Putting these at the foundation of my business, I think, sets a good example for what our expectation is. And then we eliminate some of the personal HR problems that can happen, because instead of it being like, I'm the owner and I think this should be done this way, we go back to our training manual and we treat it like the Bible. And we're like, what's the Bible say? Like, it's in the Bible. And just, it eliminates a lot of confusion and problems. I also am really passionate about telling my employees that I expect them to come back after their first year of working for me, and for us to sit down and negotiate their wage and their salary, and that this is a conversation we should have every year that they work for me. And it's a great opportunity for me to see how they're feeling in the company, what they're doing, where I could see them grow in the next stage of wherever they're at. and what opportunities we have on the table for them to take on more responsibility and to grow. What are their interests? Because not everything's going to be useful to the same people. So trying to determine that or guess that is irrelevant, when I should just have a conversation with that person and be like, what do you want?
I love that. The directness is like, I think, just appreciated by everybody, right? Like that's just something that, um, you know, owners and business, professionals that are in leadership roles can have plans, but those can go awry if those are not communicated well and the staff can't support them. So I thank you for both of your questions on that. I did miss a question from a staff, from a person that in the audience. They were asking about like how Madcap is looking at someone who might be in a barista role and then going into a different position, maybe design or e-commerce. And I think this would be really interesting. I think even Alina, you please do answer that. And then if Jasmine, you want to talk about this, because you did mention this, that you kind of help people support them in going into different roles. So how does that projection look like at both of your organizations?
So for us, in terms of like the salaried members of our team or someone who wants to join an e-commerce part or the marketing side, we realize that it starts with passion first, right? So you have to be passionate about that topic. So if something about e-com truly drives you, let's hear about it in the interview process. Let's talk about it. And what about that aspect makes you feel like you want to contribute to that conversation? We really lean into further education. So there's a lot of resources out there. We used to have a marketing individual that had never been in marketing, signed them up for a bunch of classes and said, hey, take these classes while you're here at work. Let's work on this together. And we have a lot of professionals currently in our organization that have a lot of experience in terms of whether it's e-commerce and marketing or any other aspect that you may be looking into. So right now, for example, we're hiring for an accountant and we're just like, hey, you don't have to be an accountant to be able to do these things. If you have a passion for numbers, you have figured out that this is something that makes you sing, we have a feeling that you'll excel, because it's about creating opportunity at Madcap. And whatever those steps look like, that's the big 2022 trend in HR, is that we're realizing now that less employers are looking at hard skills in terms of like, what did you do in college to do this? It's developing a great learning and development platform and teaching the individuals what you're looking for, how to get there, how to be successful, and what resources we can provide, whether it's through online classes, this, that, and the other. It couldn't be a really easy transition, but I think it depends on right person, right seat. You have to be passionate about the e-commerce. You have to be passionate about the marketing. You have to tell us about that so that we can help you through that process. But it's not unheard of at Madcap for barista to move to sales or to, I'm trying to think who else has moved, like to our procurement and other aspects, green coffee purchasing. So there's a lot of pathways for baristas here.
Thank you. And Jasmine, if you have anything to add to that, or there is a burning question from the audiences regarding burnout, and I think that would be a great one to connect on as well.
Yeah, I wanted to address that because I think it takes a lot of people are worried about burnout. And why does burnout happen? One, most of us that are fueled by passion's sort of self-sustaining. So if we're not doing a good job of infusing our staff with passion, burnout's going to happen real quick because they're not engaged with the process. But also, we need to not take people who are good at their job and then overload them with things because they're responsible or we can rely on them. So that takes, again, an honest approach to us talking about where are you at? What do you need? How can we support each other? And that's another reason why I try really hard to treat all of my staff to the same exceptional level. And I am letting them bring to the table what they're good at and focus on that instead of piling it all on just a few people who may be star baristas. So in my shop, we do something a little unconventional. I don't have titles. We don't have lead baristas. We don't have shift leads. In fact, I find that can sometimes be another source of frustration in our industry because nobody likes a shift lead that doesn't lead or a manager who just sits in the office and shouts orders. If we're all contributing to this bigger picture that is fueled by passion, then I'm picking people on my team in the hiring process and in the training process, and allowing them to grow and flourish in what they bring to the table that's different for my team.
That's really great. Alina, do you want to add to how you all deal with burnout at your different cafes and even just the salaried employees? But then also maybe you can add in a little bit of how you're recruiting. Because obviously we spoke about this, there's a lot of people that are resigning, most likely because of the burnout they're facing or just other life factors. And then how do you actually go through your recruitment process? What tools do you use for that?
Yeah, burnout's a real thing going into 2022. It's been one of those buzzwords like the Great Resignation. And I think piggybacking on what Jasmine said, if you have true passion for what you do, it's difficult to burn out on something that you love. But having a team and a manager that listens, that is in encouraging engagement every day, right? And then we have a PTO policy for both our hourly and salary people. And we don't want to nickel and dime people for their time, right? So if you need to take that time, please do. I think it takes a high level of trust in communication and understanding that, although you are passionate about this topic, if you're not taking care of yourself outside of work, then that can be a very difficult bridge to cross. Something that I've been trying to do a little bit more research in before we get ourselves in there is an employee assistance program, which is usually like a third party that can come in and help assist with issues of burnout, personal issues that employees may or may not have, and continuing to give them resources of like, hey, these are people you can reach out to should you have things outside of work that we can help you with. But here inside, it matters that the managers have a good connection with their team. And yeah, when you have passion for what you do, but the burnout still, I know it's a real deal. But yeah, encouraging people to take that time and taking care, using the benefits that we offer. And when it comes to recruitment, it's really tough, definitely, to get your ad out in the right time, in the right space. But I think the biggest thing that's been helpful for us is really advertising what benefits we do offer, because we have two medical plans, both of them high deductible. So we have a health and HSA that we do a matching for. We have a 401k, we have dental, we have vision, PTO policy. We just have some table stake HR things that I think you need to put out there to let people know, like, hey, this isn't just a job. This is somewhere that you can actually thrive. This is a career that you could choose, and you can have a sustainable wage because of the hourly rate, posting how much you would make and then talking about how much you make in tips. I think that's the start, is being really transparent with the community of like what we're doing, how we're doing it, and please be part of our team because we're super passionate. We want you to be a part of it. I know that's super hard to get through on like an ad for a job posting, but there are ways to put those little sub categories of this is what we do, these are the benefits we offer, come join our team.
Yeah, I really love how you pointed that out, because I think our baristas are the best marketing tool for getting other people into the coffee shop. If you have built a culture that is positive and proactive and forward thinking and everything that we're talking about today, then it supersedes your hiring process, because you're already known in the community as a really great place to work. So in my business, one of the things I do is lots of people walk in with applications when we're not hiring, and I still take them and I still tell them we're not hiring right now, but because this is such a great company and we know you want to be a part of it, when we are, we will go through the interview process. And that's how I get 10 to 15 to 20 people applying, because maybe they applied throughout the year when I didn't need them, and then they hear, oh my gosh, a spot is open, I've always wanted to work there. And we build that enthusiasm. It's contagious. And if your staff is happy, if your staff is passionate about their job, they're your biggest marketers. They're going to tell their friends, they're going to tell their colleagues, they're going to want to work with people who meet that perfect trifecta of people who you love working with. And it doesn't have to be people that look or think or act like you, because that's another thing I'm trying to intentionally do, is I want us to grow. So when I'm hiring, I'm not looking for somebody who maybe already is like somebody else on the staff. I'm looking for something different, so that everybody who comes into my shop sees a reflection of themselves behind that bar. And that contributes again to why people want to work in our environment, because we're not operating out of a sense of desperation. I think I also want to touch on that really quickly. When you have a really healthy environment with your staff, you shouldn't have surprise resignations. Every one of my baristas knows that I cannot replace them in 2 weeks. So while it may be industry standard to give a 2-week notice, my baristas are talking to me 3, 4, 5, 6 months in advance of when they think that they may be leaving, because we have that respect and communication. And I'm not reacting to, oh my God, you're going to leave. I am hearing that they're ready to move on to something else. I'm perhaps helping them find something else, or being that person who will write a letter for them of recommendation. And that way I can proactively have my hiring set up way before it becomes a crisis or emergency situation.
That's so great. I love that. Because you definitely have a freak out moment when 2 weeks is not enough. It's not enough to set up an ad to find somebody to replace them. Like, you're absolutely right. But somehow that is it's not just a coffee industry standard. It's like a global industry standard of like, oh yeah, I give like a couple weeks notice and that's enough. Like, there's no way that's enough, right? I love that you touched on the staff, Jasmine, also promoting the opportunities. That's super important. Alina kind of spoke about like where they put the ad out and how to make your ad like just like beefy enough so that people can like really respect, like, okay, this is a position. This is not just like a job that I'm going to do and then quit a few months later. This is like something that I'm like looking into investing in. And then you really touched on this, like, have your staff promote for you, right? So you do have the obvious like Craigslist, social media posts that you can do around it. There's like different places where you can list a job. But yeah, when your staff is like able to say like, I love working here and I want you to come join, because I would love to work with my friends. And that's like your biggest promoter. And I love that you mentioned that. So thank you for that. I think that is a challenge. One of the audience members have mentioned that like everyone's hiring right now. So like, how do you do that? And so then that's when you need to pull on your personal ties and personal relationships. And your staff is probably your best asset in that area, right? There's a lot of questions. So there's a few questions around like KPIs that you monitor and what percentage actually goes to payroll and what percentage, how do you benchmark to see where your wages are at? But then there's somebody that also asked about, let me scroll up to it. It was pretty specific: payroll percentage, overhead percentage, COGS percentage. What are the KPIs? This is like really getting into the detail, but if either of you have some information to share on that, that would be great. It looks like that's a popular question coming up.
So in terms of our percentages in our financial split, right, I think what's important for us to talk about at Madcap is that we have different business models, and each of the retail spaces are considered their own sort of space to be able to maintain themselves as a true business. So although it's part of a different part of the process, I guess you should say, at Madcap, because we have the wholesale team and we have the the e-commerce side as well. The retail thrives on its own sort of bubble. Each location is responsible for their KPIs. Usually with labor, we've been landing, especially with, it depends on the time of the year, right? So seasonality is really important. It's winter in Michigan and it's very cold and people are not outside. We try to stay around the 30 to 35% mark, depending on how staffed we are and depending on how busy we are. I think the way to moderate anything when it comes to the KPIs and percentages of overhead and costs is that we have to continue to increase revenue in order to make sure that piece of that puzzle continues to increase with the volume that we're doing. Percentages are always percentages and they'll always stay the same. In terms of COGS, our COGS tend to be a little bit higher because we're in specialty coffee, right? When you talk about other industries, you're generally looking at like a 30% COGS. We're closer to like 40, depending, or 50, depending on what kind of seasonal drinks we're doing, no, but or what coffees we're carrying, because obviously our cafes carry the coffee that we source and roast. I think it's usually a healthy percentage of labor for any organization is going to be closer to 25 to 30. So if you're within like the 30, and because if you want to do a little bit more sustainable, 30 to 35, that's generally where we're landing on the retail spaces, depending on the time of the year.
Yeah, we're doing very similar things, even though we don't have the wholesale piece. Because I do own a cocoa company, I do make a lot of the products that we are carrying in our cafe right now. So there is a slight wholesale piece to that. So the numbers are very similar. But one of the things that I do is I make my team a part of this equation. So we know what success looks like in each of our shops, and we monetarily reward that immediately. So for instance, in one of my cafes, I pay 5 staff members, and if they do $1,600 before noon, I buy them free lunch. Why am I mentioning this? Because $1,600, is a great morning for us here, and everybody who is maybe getting to that point of experiencing burnout or fatigue, or like, oh my gosh, has that incentive to reach that financial goal and to not burn out because they're so excited about free lunch. And that's a little thing, but it's a big thing because um, all of my team is invested in keeping those numbers down. I also have a project I do every year. I open it up to the whole staff where they actually calculate our cost of goods. So we do a menu analysis. It takes about a whole month to do the entire menu and to reevaluate, especially now with inflation, where things are going. And the reason why I love making that a project for the staff to pick up on is because it changes how they work on the bar. They start looking at a shot of espresso or a cup or a lid as financial money, dollars, and profit. And it elevates the experience of specialty coffee, and that we are running a company and a business. And they know that if they are invested in us succeeding, that that's going to come back in other opportunities, whether it's an origin trip or being able to go, do latte art at Coffee Fest, or whatever it is, whatever's important to them. They know that they're contributing daily to the financial security of our business.
I love that. It's like the exercise where you get $100. Okay, now spend $3 on your cost of goods. And it's like a simple activity, but everyone gets to participate, and you really do get to see then, okay, yeah, me giving out or just wasting something is not helping me, in the long run. So we have a question around affiliated marketing in coffee businesses. So are you all engaged in that right now, or are there plans for that? Could each of you speak to that a little bit? I think that's come up a few times in the questions here.
We are currently, and I could be misquoting myself, we have a genius of a CMO on staff, so you might be engaging some of these affiliated marketing moments, but historically speaking, we haven't done affiliated marketing. I don't think it's something that we are necessarily against in sense of the engaging that truly. I just don't think we have a straightforward model for doing that at this point. So
Could we define affiliated marketing for me a little further?
Yeah, I mean, I'm only gonna assume based on what the question here is, it just says on affiliated marketing. So I think that they were just referring to what other types of businesses you're adding into. That's how I looked at the question. I could be totally wrong.
oh yeah, I guess that should have been a clarifying. For me, I took it as are we paying individuals like influencers, bloggers, this and the other to promote our products, sell our products, and is there a kickback for that sort of program? It's something that we've talked about engaging in terms of we have incredible past baristas that now own cafes, and how do we engage our Madcap community to be able to do it? I don't think we have an intentional pathway for it as of yet, but it is something on the radar. At least that's how I read the question. I could be very wrong too.
Yeah.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
that makes a lot more sense. So that's exactly why I wanted to ask the question, because I honestly am probably a little different in that I want really organic content. And so again, I'm relying on my staff to build in that amazing promoting for us. We're really based on relationships. So if we're doing anything affiliated with people, it's organic. It's because we're passionate about their products. We're passionate about the people and the resources, and we're just excited to come together and support the coffee industry.
How about just like a question, because the way that I was reading it was like different business models. Like, how about like that? Like, you guys are like maybe putting your products into different with other companies, or how does that work? Like, are you guys engaged in that type of opportunities? Do your staff kind of help you to decide those things, or like bring it up with you? Like, what's that process like?
So I can answer that. Because we were the first specialty coffee association coffee shop to be here in the Midwest, we're really excited about sort of pioneering that enthusiasm. And my baristas are obsessed with latte art and throwdowns. So it works very well with my job as a regional coordinator right now here, because we get asked all the time to travel to other coffee shops to create enthusiasm for the industry. And in that way, our actual coffee shop is out there promoting, baristas and barista culture and the specialty coffee industry. We do that around the country as well. And then my cocoa company, because I am traveling around the country, putting that into other cafes and other shops, we get a piggyback off of that a little bit, which is sort of fun. And all of my staff want to work for that company as well. So that's a big deal for them when they get to go be cup of co, salesmen, and we get to travel around the country, and they get to be passionate about other products that they're doing. So again, I think it's really relationship based for us. And if there's a monetary value or kickback, that's just the icing on the cake for us.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think you guys addressed the marketing. We got a little definition here, so it was good. It was about promoting it through another person's channels or company. So, but thank you, Jasmine. I think that's also important. You kind of forget that by doing things that you also like and care about, like that's also coming back to your business and also to your staff. Like, right, that's kind of fun that they get to travel and do what they already like to do, which is latte art. I love that. We do have a question, which I think we have just a bit of time here. Stance on unions and how you supported your baristas unionizing in the past. Now, I don't know if either of you have had experience on this. I know that our other panelists did have experience. So if you wanted to share anything or just your thoughts on it or examples, if you have it.
I think it's important to recognize that a lot of unions form usually because the baristas are dissatisfied, not feeling heard, being disrespected. I don't mean to overgeneralize, but I think that it's a really important thing to address in this topic, because if you are taking care of your staff, if you have a healthy work environment and you are genuinely listening to their needs, then a lot of these issues should be addressed pre someone wanting to join a union. So I can't speak to those coffee shops that have already gotten away from that, but I do think it's pivotal that we have a healthy, proactive, forward-thinking cafe culture, and that in itself should take care of the baristas first.
In my previous life, I worked managing in a union California property. It was also corporate, so I'm pretty familiar with the union. I'm not familiar with people trying to unionize at Madcap. We haven't heard any sort of incidences of that, but the union is definitely the one thing I will say about it. It becomes very difficult for managers and employees to have normal conversations about how to take care of each other, respect each other, and create foster a culture of like we have each other's back. It might be different in different circumstances. I can't say within the specialty coffee community, but the union experiences I've had always made it a little bit more difficult to connect. There were lots of rules, which is fine. Rules are always great, but I will say that it is tough navigating through a union in terms of being even an employee. At one point, I was an employee in the union, and then I was managing the employees in the union. So it's a difficult topic to get into in the short amount of time that we have.
I think you're right. I think it deserves its own topic, but the question had come up really quickly. I know they're telling us to wrap up, but one really quick success or a little tip or tool that you would like to share before we wrap up today, that would be excellent. And I just want to say thank you so much for everyone who participated with all the questions. I hope we got through them. But then also to our panelists here, there's just a lot of knowledge and information out there. So I encourage anyone who's watching this to, continue your research, continue asking questions. A lot of folks have great ideas around how to build that people and workplace culture. And it's really nice to get the nuggets that you all have shared today. So I want you to just end it with one last little thing that you want to share with the audience to encourage them onto getting onto the right path here. And thank you.
I would just say that there are resources out there to help you build it, and you're not alone in that journey. But the sooner that you do it and the more intentional that you are about it and you check in with it, the easier your life will become, because people can tell that you truly care, because you're checking in every day and making sure that it is a priority in your organization. And again, there are tons of resources out there, whether it's local or national, that can help you set up that infrastructure.
Yeah, and I was really excited to be asked to be a part of today's panel. So thank you for that. I hope, if anything, people take away from the fact that it is possible. You need to have a lot of passion. You need to have a lot of forethought. But speaking for myself, just having 2 cafes here in the Midwest, we're doing over $1 million of coffee in a population of only 30,000. I don't think that's because we're, this amazing, incredible outlier. I think it's because we're practicing what we preach, and that definitely can translate to other cafes. So if they're interested, they just got to ask the right questions, find the right people, get a good mentor.
Thank you so much to both Jasmine and Alina, all of the audience members here. We're so appreciative that you engaged with us. This is just a little, I feel like it's a scratch on the surface of this huge topic. So much to learn and so much to talk about, but I hope this inspired all of those who participated. And a big thank you to both of you. Bye, everyone.